Okay, hi guys, welcome back. Where do I start? So, once again, thanks very much for all of your comments to my questions in my last video. It's amazing how much help you guys have been in terms of identifying and sorting the problems that I've got. So, with regards to the poor starting, it looks like it's probably pointing towards a poor battery. The cold cranking amps possibly aren't enough. I mean, there's 700 on this battery, but who knows, maybe because this battery's been standing around for a while, it's dead as pants, I don't know, but obviously the right thing to do is to test the battery. So I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to do that inside. I've got the door closed today because although it's midday on a Monday today, it's obviously loads of people are at work. So when I was working outside on Tuesday, I think it was last week, every 5 minutes you get somebody coming up and asking me how I am and if they can have a look at the car and get in, and yeah, it's all good and well, but I want to get on with the project. So I've closed the doors on everyone today, and I hope the light's good enough for this video. Obviously these lights that I've put in recently are pretty good, they're pretty bright, and also with flapping the bonnet right back, it makes it totally visible to work on the engine in here. One good point that somebody mentioned when working like this with the bonnet up and not supported is that if you're doing it outside, obviously it's quite easy for a gust of wind to catch that, and if you're working underneath here and that falls on your head, that could be pretty dangerous. So if you're working outside and it might be a bit windy, it's always best to try and lash that back somehow to make it safe. Anyway, so the other thing that I'm going to look at today, and that's why I've got the Haynes manual here, one of my subscribers, Charles, he's been really helpful. He's based over in the US, I think, and he's got a very similar car to me. I think it's a Series 2A. So Charles, thank you very much for all of your help. It's been really good reading all of your information and all of your the links that you've sent, the videos. I've watched them all this morning. How to set the valve clearance on this engine. So I mentioned in, I think, one of my emails to Charles that I hadn't done anything really on the engine or setting the valves on the engine, even during the restoration. So most of you have seen my videos will know that I did minimal work on the engine. The cylinder head is a Turner engineering head, which some of you may know. The company still exists, and they do like a gas flow head for unleaded fuel. And so I didn't really do much to it. However, it seems that I probably should at least check the valve clearances, because that test I did, when was it, on Saturday, with the €5 note and it flapping against the exhaust, at the end of the exhaust, it seems to be sucking back into the exhaust when it chuffs. So maybe there's an issue with with one of the exhaust valves. So I'm going to check that today. Basically, there's a very cool rule, which most of you probably know. It's called the Niner rule, and I'll go into that a little bit in more detail in a minute when I've taken all this stuff off here to get to the tappets. So that is the main aim of today. The other thing I've got to do, obviously, is mend that gap in the downpipe on the exhaust, because that's most likely having some effect on the way the engine's running. At the moment, without having taken it apart and everything, it seems to be the domed part of the uppipe, or the downpipe I should say, fitting into the manifold doesn't fit that well. I don't want to have to buy a new one, but maybe that's the only way, because it is a new stainless steel system from Paddock Spares, but if it doesn't fit properly, then maybe there's some kind of a gasket I can put in there. I'd already used a sealing compound for exhaust systems, which it just heated up and got brittle and cracked off. It's the paste. So maybe there's another material I can use if that is the problem, but I'm going to get to that later. First thing is the tappets, and I'm going to get started now. Okay, so that really didn't take very long just to remove those parts here. Just these 3 bolts across the top here, and then take off the choke cable, and then it's actually stuck quite well. I don't know if I put some sealant on it back then, but anyway, but it was pretty well sealed. Take those off. And this is the first time I've looked in here since I put it all back together. So I'm quite interested to see what the score is here. You can see in there, there's, what is that? Maybe that's just like some build-up of, look at that, that is gross. I bet you that's because I haven't been driving this car. I even get that in the Porsche or the BMW on the inside of the oil filler cap when I don't drive the car much, so I'm guessing that's what that is. Pretty gross. So let's just have a look at that for the first time. I mean, it's all looking pretty healthy in there. But as I say, it might look good, but the clearances might not be right. So just to explain that 9er rule, the video that Charles sent me is a pretty cool rule. It's actually, I've seen it a couple of times now on the internet now that I was searching for that. But essentially there are 8 valves on this engine, 2, 4, 6, 8. And the 9 rule is, if you're looking to adjust valve number 1, for example, then you have to crank the engine using the crank handle to make sure valve number 8 is pushed completely down, i.e. the valve is fully open, and then that means 8 plus 1 is 9. So whichever 2 numbers combine to equal 9 is the valve you can adjust. So for example, if you push 7 all the way down, then number 2 is adjustable because 7 plus 2 is 9, and so on. So 6 plus 3 is 9, so therefore you can adjust valve number 3. But the first number always has to be a fully open valve. So that's what I'm going to do. I've luckily been able to borrow an original 1968 crank handle from my friend's Series 2A, which, if I can find an image, I'll pop up on the screen now. It's a beautiful machine. It's got the same setup as my car. It is a 2 1/4 petrol with a Weber carburetor, so exactly the same. And incidentally, he has very similar running issues to mine. So he's got a bit of a chuff on the exhaust and it runs quite rich. So he was saying this morning, so I've just been up to see him this morning, he was saying, you know, if you can find out the issue with yours, then come around and show me what the problem is, because he'd like to get his sorted as well. So I'm doing all the hard work for him, and he will benefit from my work with you guys. But anyway, so this is the crank handle. It's a really simple thing. My car never had a crank handle, so and I've never used one. So what I'm going to do is, and this is the easiest way to do it, is to slide that in there and literally just crank the engine round. I think that's actually fitted. Amazingly. Let's have a look. Yeah, look at that. It just makes the job so easy. You can see it going down. So look, so for example, let's see what one's going down now. So valve number 7 there, you can see is going right down. And let's have a look. That is fully open because it's stopped moving. And that means I can now, using the 9er rule, valve number 7 plus 2 equals 9, so I can adjust, theoretically, that is loose, exactly. There, oh bloody Nora, that's quite tight actually. So maybe that isn't enough clearance, but that is the one to adjust because it's loose. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, so I've just cranked it round so that valve number 7 is fully open, which means I can adjust valve number 2 because 7 and 2 is 9. And if I go in there, it's a very, very tight fit, which I think is too tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack off that locking nut with the 1/2 inch spanner. And I'm going to move that under there. So that's nice, got nice and loose there, and just tightening it down ever so slightly, that bites. So now you've got to be a bit careful, because locking it, you don't want to move the adjustment again. So holding that tight, just nip that closed. Oh, I think that moved a little bit. But you can always check it again once you've tightened it up. So let's have a look at that. That's actually a bit loose, so obviously I loosened it up a little bit too much. So let's just do that again. Put that on there. Tighten that down. There we go. Tighten that down so it just bites there. And holding that in place. And tightening it up. So let's check that again now. Yeah, that's just biting that in there. So that's fine. That's how you do it. Okay, so I've set all of the valves now, and I'm just going to, now that I've got access to them all, re-torque all of the cylinder head bolts. So they go to 87 Newton meters, and there's a specific pattern how that goes, and I've got that on a picture in front of me here. It's also in the Haynes manual, but I just found it online. So that's what I'm going to do now. I think if you're putting your cylinder head on, it's worth torquing it in stages. I was just looking at a forum online, and somebody mentioned that in the same pattern as I just showed you, torque to 50 Newton meters and then torque to spec in that pattern again. To get to all of those cylinder bolts, you have to take the spark plugs out. So that gives me a good opportunity to have a look at all of the spark plugs, which I didn't the other day. So that looks fine. That looks fine. That looks fine. And that looks fine. So, what else did I want to say? So yeah, so it's the torque wrench settings are, as I say, it's actually 88 Newton meters, but 65 foot pounds. I just got that off Steam, Wally. Your video, actually, I just put it into Google and it came up straight away with your rather handy video. So I got it off there. Thanks very much. But I'm going to set those now and see how we get on. Bolts tightened up. Some were a little bit loose, others were absolutely fine, but you know, the loose ones weren't loose by much. So I'm now going to torque down the spark plugs, put the rocker cover back on, and that's one job done. Okay, so I've just managed to get the downpipe section of the exhaust off of the car, which is quite tricky because I didn't really want to move the car outside and it's a bit cramped, so it's a bit of a pain in the ass. But anyway, if we look at this end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it up just to see what that looks like. And ideally, I would take the manifold out of the car and see if it actually fits. But what I'm wondering is that when I fitted it to the car, that I fitted the rear section first, which might have been adjusted sort of pointing forward a little bit and tipping up. And then when I've tried to tighten that up to the manifold, it's just gone on wonky. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to get it level as best I can underneath the car and make sure that is absolutely square to the manifold, and give it the best sort of chance. I mean, you can see the quality is bloody shoddy. You know, it's just sort of slapped together. So it wouldn't surprise me if that end part was on wonky. In fact, I'm just looking at it now. That's straight up there. I don't know. Can't really see in there, but I'm going to try that first. See if that does anything. You can see really where the gases have been getting past. That is mainly on the inside. So the section closest, or the part of that dome closest to the engine. So that's where the leak has obviously been. But I don't know, you know, if it is a bit, if it's not quite true, could I make up some kind of a copper gasket and put it on there so I can squash it in there? Or is there any kind of gasket I can put between the downpipe and the manifold? Let me know. Okay, so I'm taking this from underneath the car. I didn't actually push it outside in the end, I just left it where it was. And I've put quite a bit of that sealant, that exhaust sealant, on the domed part of the downpipe and also the domed mating part of the manifold. So I've tightened those flange bolts up evenly as possible, so it's a similar sort of gap all the way around. And I haven't over tightened them, purely because I think it might actually distort that flange a little bit and therefore distort possibly the domed part of the downpipe. So, but they're good and tight, and I'll check them once I've run the car as well. So that's that done. I've also done the same to this connection here, and that is the exhaust done. Okay, so I've got everything back together. Got the heat shield on, background there, which has been off for absolutely ages. Got the bonnet back down and it's off the chocks. And yeah, I'm pretty much done for today. I don't want to go home quite yet, but I'm just looking for small jobs to do. And I've just started tidying the garage a little bit, but that's got the exhaust done. I'm going to wait for that putty to dry. They say 24 hours. And then I'll try that compressor trick again to make sure all the gaps are sealed. And then I will start. There's one thing I've always wondered about. Here on the top of the manifold here, or the inlet manifold, there is I guess that's a vacuum pipe, which clearly goes round to the oil filler neck, and it's been blocked off at some point. And I think they did that when they replaced the Zenith carb with this Weber carb. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts of whether that actually should be connected, those two things, or whether it's not needed.